So we'll just wait a few seconds as people filter in. I know there's been some meetings that have just finished. Right, let's make a start because I'm sure we've got a jam-packed session with lots of speakers and contributors. So welcome to people joining us for this learning and teaching webinar. This is the second one of the academic year, and this one's quite close to home in terms of the involvement of University of Suffolk staff and students. So we've got Ivana, Joe Trousdale, Kevin Wallace, Alexander Hickey, and Faraz, who are all members of a project called Learning Hubs. And they're going to talk to us today about how they've established a community of practice as sort of creating and working on this project of Learning Hubs. So without any further delay, I'll hand over. I will just say that there will be some time for questions towards the end of the webinar. So please do write them in the chat and we will come to them later and we can put those questions to your presenters. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Phil, for the introduction. Thank you for having us here at the Learning and Teaching webinar. It's really nice to be able to give an update on our project and to focus the talk today on the aspects of co-creation from the overall Learning Hub project. And what you didn't say, Phil, is that you are part of this project as well. So you will be in some of our pictures here at least. And we will mention the work that we can have worked together.
I'll look forward to them.
Great. So let me just say one more time, thank you everyone for joining us and listening to us about co-creating. What we will talk about today is really the project, how it came about, and we will talk about what Learning Hubs are, and hopefully we'll be able to take something from that for other departments across our university. And if you are listening to us from different universities, either as academics, you will be hopefully inspired by how to use co-creation in your universities. And if you are a student, maybe you'll come up with ideas of how you would like to join similar projects. Thank you, Kevin. Great, perfect. I would probably start with saying that why co-creation, why we wanted to co-create with students and across the university with different members of staff, was that a few years back, our university came up with a new idea of having a block and blend teaching and learning format. And what that meant was a great opportunity for putting more digital learning, digitally allowed learning into our teaching and learning practice. So more of blended pedagogies started to play a role. But also what block means is that our undergraduate students are focusing on one module at a time. And that means that they can focus on module content, but we felt that we wanted to support their overall academic and other transferable skills a little bit more and find those connections between the blocks. And we were trying to find a way how to do that with these digital opportunities. So we came up with the idea of the Learning Hubs as kind of online spaces where skill development can happen across the different blocks throughout the year. And what we did in the first academic year was that we created the Learning Hub as an idea, and we created a few activities. We were supported by an internal CELT project, CELT funding. So that's our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. And with this internal funding, we were able to develop and evaluate the first round of these Learning Hub activities. And by the way, at the end of the presentation, I will be directing you to current CELT funding. So think about that as well as internal opportunities at the university, what we can do in our courses. And after this was done, we felt that it's not enough. Everybody's saying that learning hubs are a really good idea. People want to be involved. We shared it at internal and external conferences. Students were saying, oh, that's a great idea. It's a great resource. But not too many people were actually engaging with the activities. So that's why we wanted co-creation. That's why we wanted to hack it. We wanted to know how to make learning hubs something that will really work for students and for staff, because the idea for staff was to create a source or resource pool of sustainable activities for supporting skills of students in ways that that can be transferred across courses, and we can share the kind of knowledge base and the resources that we have at the university. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ivana. Okay, so I'm Kev Wallace. I'm a learning designer here, part of the Centre for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at the university, part of professional services. So what are the learning hubs? So the learning hubs bring together 4 main areas for students: academic skills, university life and well-being, transferable skills, and employability skills. Now, within each of these areas, we have created lots of individual activities to cover valuable skill lessons, from academic writing through to digital literacy and job searching. So that's just a few examples. So what do they actually look like in the wild? So each activity starts off with a welcome page. So it has an introduction explaining the purpose of this skills activity and giving some context as to why this may be useful from a student point of view. And as you can see here, and you will in the next few slides, we use HTML pages rather than PowerPoints or other types of uploaded documents, just for scalability of devices and easier accessibility. So H5P, we use H5P interactivity. So these nice clickable, responsive, interactive activities. These do take a little time to create. However, there's a lot of evidence that these are more engaging and can draw the student in so that they can soak up more of that valuable knowledge that the academics are trying to get across to them. So they kind of engage the learners in different forms of learning rather than just reading or watching something. So in the learning hubs, members of staff can direct students here, and you have access to these. So you don't need to create them or recreate anything, although the offer will be there for you to join us if you choose to in the future. Videos. So we're encouraged to make videos. Videos contain a lot of information, so they're audio and visual. So videos by university teachers. Yes, making your own videos is encouraged because it gives that online sense of presence. It can be tailored to exactly what you want your students to know, but it does take some thought and preparation as well as time to create. So these tailor-made videos to specific skill sets are already available in this centralized pool of Learning Hub resources. So it should save time for the teachers, as you can simply direct students to specific activities. However, in some of the feedback we got from our co-creating students, they said that, hey, my module leader is the expert here, and if they direct me to a video, then this is the perfect video. So if we find ideal pre-created accessible videos out there, then we're happy to use them. However, as you can see here, it's still important to contextualize this with text leading into it, setting the scene for why you should be watching this and what you should be thinking of whilst you're watching it, and the takeaway messages. Quizzes. So we embed quizzes within all the activities. These are available in all types of formats. So they could be made using the H5P interactive tool or within Brightspace itself, which is our online learning environment. So quizzes offer a nice opportunity to check for learning during the activity to ensure that learning is being absorbed, getting students to consider what you've read or what you've watched or what you've interacted with. And it's a great place for some instant feedback, which can be embedded within the quiz itself. So for a little bit of additional learning, and this can pop up straight away, both for correct as well as incorrect answers. And badges and certificates. So just to make the whole experience a little bit more rewarding and incentivizing, badges and certificates are designed and awarded once certain conditions are met. So maybe it's a little bit of a friendly competition to help with engagement, but also promoting a little bit of peer-to-peer recognition of these additional skills that students are learning, which we think are vital to a successful university journey, as well as a nicely employable graduate. So that's a little bit of the scene of what the Learning Hubs actually are. And now I'll hand across to Alex.
Thanks very much, Kev. I'm Alex. I'm a history student. I'm a second year, and I joined the co-creating project in January when it was opened up to students. As you can see by this rather nice graphic that Kev's put together for us, the team's consisting of a lot of different people across the university, learning designers, students, library and learning services, and obviously the academics. The co-creating part is what I really want to talk to you about today, because I think for me it's been the most valuable part of Learning Hubs, but I'm a bit biased because frankly that's the reason I'm on this team in the first place. But I think co-creating has been really valuable because through the consistent concerted efforts of staff, students have been able to feel not only welcome, but as though their contributions are valuable and insightful, and that's been really lovely. You get to feel as though we're part of these, high-level academic discussions that sometimes we get in seminars, but now we get with professionals who've been in their field for like a decade or more. I really have to give a lot of credit to Ivana for this, because even though co-creating's been about kind of breaking down hierarchies, it's not as though I've suddenly stopped being a student. Ivana's the one that's put this together for us along with the rest of the team. And I think that the importance of co-creating is not that suddenly everyone's on an equal playing field, it's that everyone gets to play to their strengths. At the end of the day, if I was put in charge of putting together a webinar, I would feel completely out of my depth and we probably wouldn't be here today. The fact is that part of co-creating is encouraging people who aren't part of the in-group, which in this case is us, the students. We get to feel encouraged to play in a setting that we aren't usually in, and invited because our discussion is valuable in some way. Thank you very much, Kev.
All right, thanks, Alex. So yes, I'm Faraz Gul. I'm a second year history student, just like Alex, and I'm also recently a student ambassador for the university. So from the first 5 months from February to June 2023, when we took part in it, so we did 16 3-hour workshops, which included SWOT analysis, discussion notes, and reflective logs, along with an impact questionnaire. We talked a lot about the online learning hub activities, what makes good online learning, and we also designed a research study together, which included a survey for students about their engagement with the online activities on Brightspace, and we also conducted focus groups with staff. Students were involved in both creating the survey and focus group. I also took part in constructing the questionnaire on QuestionPro and was involved with correcting the transcripts for the focus group meetings. In this presentation, we're focusing on study A, co-creation, being involved in this process of working together. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I was just needing to unmute, the usual basics. Sorry about that. So as both Alex and Faraz have outlined, we were working very much as a community of learners in which we were drawing upon each other's strengths and in which we were very respectful of way of working. So we naturally ended up finding ourselves drawing upon the theoretical work of Leuven-Wenger in terms of the operation of a community of practice. And Leuven-Wenger's work also underpins a model for education that I have developed, and which we ended up sharing, debating, and kind of taking on as our theoretical frame. So I wanted to just share some of the dimensions of that were particularly significant to us, and which have been significant in terms of the educational work that I've developed. So one of the characteristics that Leuven-Wenger suggests about learning is that it is essentially an inherently social experience. And their model is derived from looking at the way in Indigenous communities expertise has been developed and the ways in which learning is shared. And their argument is that actually we become experts by sharing with each other the kinds of skills, knowledges, stories we've got and practices. So we might demonstrate them, we might talk about them, we might debate them, but essentially we learn from each other in relation to the things that we are doing together. We might share knowledge, we might share particular kinds of expertise, but what we're doing is learning from each other in ways that are quite lived. So we are absorbing the kinds of behaviours. We see how people do it round here. We see what's expected. And in that way, although we are learning, we are almost unconsciously learning. And it's based on the notion that we are, as human beings, essentially imitative. We want to copy each other in order to have that sense of belonging. So the idea that participating, being a member of that community, is something that we choose to do, and that we're recognized for the expertise that we bring. They also talk about this notion of legitimate peripheral participation. And it's a notion that actually just by being there, we are agreeing to and being part of a learning community. And that it's legitimate whether we are at the heart of it, whether we're the one who is leading and demonstrating something, or whether we are simply watching. Wherever we are in that process is what moves forward. So I'm going to connect that now just to the model that we used, which is it's called the Trousdale Art Making Model for Education, the TAME, that has these particular dimensions to it. There are 3 structuring principles. I've already talked about the community of practice. In the model that I've developed, which is the one I've been using more broadly in education, there's also this notion of art making at the heart of it. And that's with the belief that essentially, as human beings, one of the things that makes us human is our ability to imagine and to create. And by creating, we affirm ourselves as being human. We affirm our uniqueness. We affirm the fact that we are creative and we are collaborative, that we connect with things, people, spaces, and that we desire to make things. And that affirms who we are. So that's something that's really essential to our way of being. So the relationships we have with people and the stories that we tell. And what pulls this whole thing together, what pulls the work together, is the notion of a commission. So just as art makers get commissions, any community of practice is commissioned, and that gives a purpose to what we're doing. So embeds in that, we embed the kind of learning outcomes that we want and the knowledge that we want, and they're designed in as being essential to the commission. So here in the learning hubs, there were 2 things that we were focusing upon. Was that the co-created product itself, in the same way as Faraz has looked in terms of identified in the research the 2 strands. So we had the product itself, but also further researching the way in which, as a co-creating, co-learning community, those blended pedagogies were going to work. I think that's probably enough for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, and thank you, Alex and Faraz. So we're kind of getting an idea of what we were actually doing, because we're doing so well with time. I can tell you a little bit more, perhaps, of what the project looked like. So we were meeting once a week to focus on our commission, which was to co-create better learning hubs and to identify the principles of blended pedagogies. So what makes good blended digital learning? We had a lot of discussions about this, and there were about 12 of us meeting very regularly, meeting very regularly in these weekly meetings. So we were exploring the product of the learning hubs, and alongside of, and we created designed a study around that, but we're not really talking about the results of that study today. But what we're talking about is exactly, as Faraz mentioned, the co-creation part of it. So what did it mean to us that we were involved in this co-creative project, and what we found out? So some of the findings from, for example, our impact questionnaire that we filled in our group was that co-creation can be defined in terms of acknowledging diversity and valuing diversity as a social justice, as a claim to social justice, almost, that the diversity means, accepting diversity means that we have created a really inclusive environment, that it's meaningful for its members, but also that we can really achieve a higher quality result, that our learning hubs can be better because of this diversity, and because of being inclusive, we're actually creating a better product. And nicely overlapping with that, also the digital blended pedagogies are showing to be an inclusive way of learning. So there are a lot of overlaps with these valuing diversity and inclusion. And because of that, there's a lot of pedagogical reasoning for using co-creative approaches in designing curricula and in designing digital and blended pedagogies. So our project was like a project in a project. So we have the learning hubs as a product, but we have the project around co-creation around it as well. And I think that it would be interesting for you maybe to hear more of kind of personal stories of what it meant to the members of this community of practice, community of learners that is represented by us today. And we'll start with the students talking about their experience.
Thanks, Ivana. So yes, I found the Learning Hubs project extremely worthwhile. So it helped me to interact with people that I was unfamiliar with, helped me, for instance, I was able to interact with a wide variety of people from different departments across the university. When I first started the work, I didn't know really anyone outside the history department. So this was a real eye-opener for me. I got to meet new people and also understand how the different departments work. I was also able to learn how to use new software such as Figma, and I was able to try some of the tab creating on Brightspace, which I enjoyed the most. And it was also an opportunity to discuss and learn the MHRA referencing style that we use at the history department for the university. Also helps us get a better understanding how to use it in the future. So yes, I think it was really worthwhile, and I do look forward to continue working with everyone.
Thanks very much, Faraz and Kev. That's me on the slide there. On a personal level, I've benefited from the kind of high-level academic discussions that have occurred in every meeting we've had in Learning Hubs. It's developed my ability to have these kind of conversations, which is useful for my course, but just as a life skill to be able to have these kind of conversations is really exciting. But I think, especially, I remember in January when I first joined Learning Hubs, something I noticed when I sat down in the room, and suddenly all these faces that I didn't recognize, and Faraz I don't think was there yet, or we weren't at the same meeting. I think if you're an academic, it can be hard to realize how unique the language and the culture can be in academic circles. And if you're not part of that in-group, it can feel a little bit scary. And that's, I think, something that students will feel even if they walk into a seminar group in their first year. But Learning Hubs has given me the opportunity to kind of break into that circle in a really safe space, and to do it with people that aren't in the same boat as me. Obviously we've got other students like Faraz on the course, but the majority of people on the team are staff. So there are all these academics that are always engaged in these kind of conversations, and it gives you a place to kind of test the waters as a student in a really unique way. The picture on the screen is perhaps not the best example of that. In that picture, even though we look like we're having very serious academic discussions, that's Keith had put on a gamification workshop for us, where we were discussing different ways of engaging students. But actually, this kind of workshop was a super valuable part of the Co-Creating Learning Hubs, because this was not only a cool team building activity, but it was pretty more than that. It was a really effective way of taking us out of these kind of quite strict, rigid academic environments and putting us all on an even playing field, which was super helpful if you're a student. And taking us out for a minute of that allowed us to consider different ways of engaging students. Keith was talking to us about how we might use gamification, in other words, creating resources that were more game-like, competitive in their nature, to engage students in Learning Hubs. And in that picture, that's my team absolutely dominating the other side of the room where they're taking that photo from, in debate and discussion in that environment, which I think has been super cool. Thanks, Kev.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Okay, so from my point of view, so professionally, because I'm learning designer, sort of part of professional services, have like a staff-facing role. It's professionally, it's for me, it's like how I can help academics and teaching staff save time. So by facilitating more engaging learning resources, which this project allowed us to do. So I see a real advantage here of being able to spread the word and help with these H5P interactive resources. So there is evidence out there about H5P because they're clickable. You can choose, it's like choose your own journey sometimes if you really get into it. And these applications can promote student engagement. It allows for students to be more active, more constructive, and can enable you to manipulate your understanding of the learning material. So it kind of embeds decision making about the actual content that you're learning, or within the online learning environment, and you're actively engaged in a meaningful manner. So that for me is a really cool thing. However, because of my job, I am a learning designer. I know these things can be time consuming, and we tell all our academics, and we run workshops on how to do these, and it's just like, you guys are, as a teacher, you're quite busy just to engage and teach and keep your students engaged with your teaching, but also prepping the lesson. So I know that H5P can take time to create. So by being involved in this group and allowing, I can run workshops with the students and the staff here within this group, and we can create these H5P resources specific to these skill sets that are within the Learning Hub. So I can invest my time there to make this central pool of resources, shared my knowledge. So we co-created a lot of these, and these are now accessible. And it's, in theory, this is going to free up some time for the teaching academics, because if there's like exams coming up or something like that, they can point students towards the exam prep activity. So for me, that's a really good, that's a really awesome benefit of being involved here. However, it's also been an awesome social experiment. I guess not really a social experiment, it's just been an awesome social time. So just like it's been, Faraz and Alex have mentioned, I've really enjoyed being part of this group. We've really bonded well as a team. And just being in this sort of informal environment, we can chat about lots of other things. So we're doing our workshops. However, there's so many other little opportunities and things that are mentioned, almost like offhand, that I have noted down, and I would love to follow up. And I am, in fact, following up from an instructional design, learning designer point of view. There's so many little things that students have said, oh, this would be really cool if we could. So there's lots of little other projects that have sort of spun from this, like we're saying, projects in projects in projects. And also, just talking about this picture here. So I was actually, it gave me the chance as a professional service staff representing professional services as part of this co-creating team alongside academics and students. So this is us sitting down at a table, doing last minute prep just before we presented our co-creating presentation at a conference in Crete. So thanks very much for that opportunity. Right, over to the academics.
Great. Joe, do you want to start by saying how it was for you?
Thank you. I'm going to pick up from Kev's point really about the significance of the social dynamic. I think one of the things that was really, really notable about this project was the kind of the delight that we had, and the way in which we prioritized the time. Rather than this being something that we had to do, there was a sense of joy in coming into the room. And I think there's an awful lot of things that that it's hard to show in the photos, but that sort of sense of the attention that you as a facilitator, Ivana, would put into the significance of the space. We know the spaces, the learning spaces and stuff are not necessarily always designed for the ideal learning environment. But we would always be in a space where either you would create, or it would already be a space in which we would be the equivalent of a circle. So the tables would be arranged in a way whereby we could see each other. We could move around. We collaborated in different ways. Sometimes we were collaborating with people whose perspectives were very different from ours, and sometimes we were collaborating with people who might have similar perspectives, depending on the task. And so that constant shift and dynamic was always exciting. So you felt you were learning something, and I think that sort of sense of your perspective mattering and being able to listen honestly to each other is something that progressively over the weeks, I felt I witnessed a sense from initially this being something that was kind of coordinated and led from the centre, and it started to be coordinated across people. I think partly the opportunity to be able to share that information. Kev's mentioned the conferences, and there clearly were multiples of those, but at different times, different members of the team were leading on talking about that. And each time they led, they would give their spin about what mattered to them. And I think the fact that we were working in digital form in some ways gave what might otherwise have been a kind of almost an irresistible power dynamic between academics and students was shifted, because a lot of the time the academics were not the experts in how this worked. And the learning designers, even though they knew certain things could happen, they didn't necessarily know what the appetite was or the way in which that might be received. So there was this genuine sense of exchange that just grew and grew over the time. And I think that's the essence of the success of co-design. That'll do for me.
Thank you. It was amazing for me. I loved Thursdays. It was just so much fun. And I just loved, I loved that energy of being so focused and so driven. And I think that if we go back to the theoretical model, really having that real world commission is something that's absolutely necessary for co-creation. So you're co-creating. So what are you co-creating? It needs to matter. And it needs to matter to everyone involved. So it became a really creative environment. So it was amazing for me to be able to, facilitate the group and to almost show to a group of people that, come on, we can do this. We know how to do this, and we can create this amazing group that can serve maybe as an example for other similar groups happening in the future across the university and maybe beyond at other universities as well. So that's really the project was just this, emotionally nurturing place and coming up with the really good product in the end. So that's how it felt for me. And now it also helps me to be able to define what I do and formulate that. So what are the principles of co-creation? What is it that makes good, learning and teaching practice or good teamwork, let's say, and all of this is now coming out as almost as data from this experience. So I was really fortunate to work with an amazing group of people, and it was really nice to be connected with different departments at the university. So with learning and teaching designers, with the librarians, but also the careers team, and of course students as well. And students not only from childhood and education, who I normally meet with, but students from other departments as well. So that was really nice. Thank you. So what we learned from the co-creative project was a lot. We all learned individually different things depending on what our skills were entering the project. A lot of people expressed that they were empowered in the skills that they had, or they were able to apply the skills in the group, and learned some bits here and there as well of completely new things. And I think it was this experience of having a voice in the group, having that respect for each other, and experiencing that equality in the group, having that experience of an inclusive environment. And what we learned in terms of how could co-creation work, and how could co-creative projects be set up. So definitely one point that I take away for future projects is in terms of ethics and ethical applications for co-creative projects. That needs to be persuasive in terms of, for example, recruitment of the members of the group, where I was very, not hesitant, but very careful in the beginning of just signposting and inviting students, for example, just through announcements. It turned out that that's not actually inclusive, and it works better for co-creative projects to have that invitation that's pulling people in, that it's not, pushing people to do something they don't want to do, but that invitation needs to be there. And similar results were coming out of the digital pedagogies, blended pedagogies as well. So there's a really nice overlap in what it means to be involved in that learning community, where one of our major kind of results or findings was that the role of the tutor is really crucial in inviting students to engage with blended online content. So there's always this kind of overlap of I want to be invited. I want you, the academic, to pull me in and tell me that I matter in this community, or that you want me to be involved. And when you tell me that, then I'm happy to be involved and I'm happy to be a part of that. So it's a two-way process, that this relationship is really important in co-creation and in the blended pedagogies as well. Right. So what's next now?
Okay, so going forwards, how can you get involved in this co-creation project? So the Learning Hubs are currently being trialled in the Childhood Roots courses. So if you're involved in Childhood Roots courses at the university here at Suffolk, you know where to find us. If you're an academic at Suffolk and you're in another course, you should email Ivana. Email us and we can chat about collaboration and how you can access these resources. And having said that, currently we are designing a CPD event of how you can access and utilize these co-created Learning Hub resources for your own teaching practice and actually become involved and be part of this community as well. So Ivana is your first point of contact there. If you are watching and you are from an external university, you need to email Ivana. Again, email us. Ivana's going to be hopefully quite busy checking her inbox. And again, we can chat about how we can organize or help you to organize and facilitate these award-winning co-creating workshops and get this little community of practice and all the fantastic things that is happening with these Learning Hubs. So email Ivana is the thing going forwards. So thanks very much and hope to hear from you.
Thank you. So definitely get in touch and keep an eye open for the staff CPD. And we will be rolling out a Brightspace page module that's accessible to all students, hopefully, with some exemplar activities that students can start using across the school, definitely, maybe across the whole university as well. We'll see how that's going, but we're happy for staff to take the activities that we already have, adapt them, put them into their modules and so on. So we can chat about how to do that technically so that everyone can have access to everything that they want to be using and adapting for their purposes. Right, so this is not the only co-creative project that we have at the university. Another one is connected with our student ambassadors project. So it's called Diploma, and it is about creating a handbook of activities for training of student ambassadors that they can be then using as a self-experiential training and then using it in outreach activities in schools and also at the university in their student ambassador role. So for this one, definitely follow us on Facebook. And if you want more information, you can also email Dr. Claire Gartland about this one, but also me, that's fine. And we have co-created these resources with students as well. So there's kind of a theme at the University of Suffolk going with co-creation. So hopefully we're putting ourselves on the map here with co-creating curricula. And right, and the last slide, no, not the last slide, one more piece of information. If you're interested in co-creating and maybe targeting specific groups of students, maybe there's a great opportunity to apply for our internal CELT sponsored project. So there's opportunities to develop curricula in this way as well and get some University of Suffolk internal funding if you're from our university. And that's it. And our last slide is for you to check out the website of the Learning Hubs if you want to have more information. And hopefully we can answer some questions now and have a more of an open discussion, because I'm sure there are lots of things that we haven't mentioned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And really insightful. So please do post any questions in the chat, and I will put them to either Joe, Ivana, Kevin, Alex, and Faraz. I think while we perhaps wait for them to come in, and this is obviously coming from somebody who has worked within the project as well, which has been a fantastic experience for myself, and I really sort of echo some of the sort of experiences that everybody shared. What do you think, and this is a question for everybody, is perhaps if you could provide one of the key conditions that almost makes collaboration and co-creation work, what would it be? I'll start with Kevin.
That's a good question. We mentioned a few times just about being honest, I think, because we did sort of build up a nice little community group and sort of coming into it, but yeah, with students, academics and learning designers, but that sense of honesty, of being really honest with each other and just saying what you really want out of the project, but also what you want from, from a design point of view. As a student, I know you keep saying watch the videos, but do you really want those videos? So I think some of that is just having that mindset, and that sort of comes along over the days that you begin to trust each other, but it's just going into that mindset that it's a nice, safe place, and you can really have some quite good, honest, frank, open discussions, which is what we did. So there's mine.
I think I could contribute something to that too. In the kind of just like little small like social level, in groups, having the staff kind of make a concerted effort to kind of just go, if they think you're about to speak or you've got something to say, kind of pull you out and say, oh, is that something that you want to say, you want to contribute something? Those small little micro moments are really valuable because they get students to engage more. I mean, it works in seminars, as my teachers will know, but it works especially well here in getting students to engage. I think I'll give you two factors because I've got two. I think another thing is that for this project especially, you kind of need students. If you want to know what do students want out of their learning resources, you need to ask students. And the fact that you need students means you're going to get student discussion in these kind of groups. And I think that the team and staff here have done a wonderful job at managing that.
I agree with Alex, actually. Yep. And yeah, what goes on in our history course, at the end of each module, we have a student voice forum. We talk to our course rep about what we enjoyed about the module and what we thought didn't go so well. And then after we give the feedback, then the course rep discusses it with the leaders and teachers, and then we move on to the next module, trying to improve on that. It's a really nice thing. The same goes for the learning hubs. Like, we can talk about, so what's not going well for current studies and what we can do to improve on it.
Thank you, Faraz. That's really interesting. And I guess before we go to Joe and Ivana for their conditions, so get ready. From a student perspective, do you sort of go away from the perhaps the meetings and also perhaps engage with other students and maybe test out some of the ideas and seek their perspectives as well?
I haven't really thought about that, no, but that would be an interesting idea to just talk to others. But it's already been brought up, the idea of learning hubs in our class, actually. Yeah, we did have a discussion about it on Monday when Keith brought up the webinar.
Interesting, thank you. Ivana?
Sure. So I'd say that for an academic, it's like an internal condition to enter any co-creation with the idea that you're not better than anyone in the group, that there's you need to have that non-hierarchical mindset. I think that you're inviting the people to be a part of the group because they know more than you do. And I think that's really important, that you're not, as an academic, you're not there to run the show. But then on the other hand, I think that structure is important as well, because it gives that safety for creativity. And I think this is my creative arts background, maybe a little bit, that you need that invitation for creativity. You need some kind of a framework, some safety net, something to work on, something to have boundaries, and then you can play within those boundaries and you can have that safety to explore. And you have to be open to the fact that you don't know the result. You don't know what the learning hubs will look like at the end. If I wanted to have my learning hubs and ask students how to make my learning hubs better, that probably wouldn't work. But I need to be open to the idea that maybe in the end we'll say that learning hubs are just not going to work and we're not going to have learning hubs. And that's still a possibility, right? So I need to be open to that.
That's really interesting. Very, very interesting. And Joe, one key condition, perhaps?
Well, I think a lot of them have been covered, but I think it is this balance between the relationality which it comes from, which is also infused with the respect, but also a sense of openness, which I think is kind of what, you know, Ivana is talking about, that in this context, being able to see other people as being equally significant and potentially taking things in different directions, I think is something that's really important in the process. And I noticed that in the chat, Claire's just posed a question about, would this have worked if it had taken place online only? I don't know. I suspect it would have been very different. I know for me personally, a lot of the time it was the conversations over the break times, and having food and drink together and feeling looked after was also part of that dynamic as well. But I think that notion of being able to sort of affirm, check out and probe the little bits of other people's perspectives in that informal and interpersonal way was really important to its success. So I'm not sure that it wouldn't have worked, but I think it would have been very different. And for me personally, it would have been less satisfying.
Interesting. Does anybody else have any kind of thoughts on Claire's question around would the project have been as successful as it has been if it was perhaps online or blended? I
mean, I've got to disagree with Joe. I think actually it would have failed. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been involved in the project if it had been on Teams. You know, I know Gen Z, my generation, have a bit of a reputation for being very you know, technologically adept, and on a personal level, I am too. But I find that kind of online places like Teams and stuff are really ineffective for communicating, like on a conversational level. And I think that the fact that, as Joe said, we got to have chats over breaks and stuff was a really important part of cohesion in the group. I mean, when at the beginning of the year, for my first year, a lot of it was online. I kind of campaigned and asked the history department if they'd move a lot more stuff in person. They have, which I know Fran in the chat said something about the university being small. And I think that's actually been one of the advantages, is that because we are a small team, it means that the cohesion is much greater. I read when I was looking at universities that Oxford had something like 100 history professors, which sounds very cool if you can specialize in anything you possibly want. But I can't imagine having 100 of us sit around a room and have a really in-depth co-creating experience, or online for that matter. So I guess the answer is no for me.
Yeah, I also agree with the idea about it's a good thing that Suffolk's quite small, because it's easier also to talk with others as well. Because when in a university like Oxford and Cambridge and London, they're quite big universities, so there's a wider scope of things. It's not easy to cover everything, to cover all the topics that you want to talk about. But with Suffolk, you can easily bring it down. You can talk about it much more easily. You don't have to worry about too many opinions.
I like a challenge. I would try an online one. just try. But I think you would need something that would pull people in. Now, what would be that thing that you would be looking forward to, that you can't wait to turn the Teams on Thursday? Like we were, really looking forward to joining the group on a weekly basis. So I think you'd need something that will pull people in. And I'm not sure if I know what that is, but I may come up with something, Phil, next year, okay?
Yes, there's always a tendency, and I may be giving away my secrets here, but online, when you engage in online meetings, and there's always that tendency to do some other things as well, like the odd email or so. Did it help maybe being in person in terms of less distractions as well?
I'd say yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It's much easier to talk with in person because you're focused on the people there, and it's kind of mandatory. Actually, it is mandatory, because when you're online at home, then you can easily get distracted and just do other things because they can't see you if it's not in view of your screen, and that's the problem. But if you're in person, then you're focused all the time with it.
Yeah, just following what Faraz said and kind of what Ivana said, from a learning design point of view, so we admin Brightspace and promote active blended learning. So similarly, I'd like the challenge. So potentially it could work online, but yeah, the format would have to be different. It would have to be delivered. We'd have to come up with something different because, as Faraz was sort of saying, and Alex, that in-person time was really valuable, and we really gelled together, and it just allowed us to be more creative, and I think it hastened, made the process much quicker. I think it would, yeah, online might be possible, but we'd have to approach it very differently, I think.
Interesting. Thank you, Kevin. Please do type any questions. I've got lots of questions. I mean, in terms of probably more for Ivana, in terms of, so you showed the slide with the sort of the breakdown of the participants and the roles of the participants. Was that, how much thought went into that decision in terms of how many students do we need, how many academics do we need, how many learning designers? Was that something that you really kind of put a lot of thought into, or was it more spontaneous?
Originally, I knew that I wanted some people from our childhood and education team to be involved in developing the learning hubs further. So it started with kind of key academics from our team. And then I wanted to balance it with the number of students. So, and then, you know, kind of had to play with funding available as well. So we put in for 6 students to be involved and funded to have sort of a balance. But then the invitation went out to the learning designers, and it almost snowballed from that, because also the library wanted to be involved, and it was really valuable. So we put in academic skills advisors, and I don't know, just the invitation grew. And then kind of by accident, we were in a meeting, and Keith was in the meeting as well. And then he brought it to the history team, and he pulled in the history students, and that was amazing. And so it kind of just happened, I think, the number of people from each of the departments and so. But I think that, again, the important part was wanting to be involved in creating the product, that it was an interesting product to create. But
Okay.
a balance is good from the different voices, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just thinking about maybe people who are, you know, attending that are kind of thinking that they could perhaps start to co-create, you know, with students and with different colleagues across universities. Do you think that this kind of, obviously learning hubs is almost, it transcends disciplines and subjects at the university, but do you think individual courses and perhaps modules could take this approach?
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea, but it's thinking about what is reasonable. No, it's the involvement of students in co-creating curricula can be, you know, at the different levels or different kind of contribution. So it can be just a consultation of an existing curriculum, and then that's something else, right? And creating something from scratch completely. And what is the product? You know, what is the product that we're focusing on? What is the commission? And is it something that it's a really real world? Is this, if we create something, is that going to happen? Or is it just, I don't know, to have fun, to find out opinions? And that's different, I think.
And Alex and Faraz, I mean, have you experienced, or would you be open to opportunities, perhaps, obviously you're both history students, to get involved in module, you know, have your say in module creation and the direction that a module perhaps goes in?
That would be a good idea. I'm thinking, yeah, that might be a nice idea to go beyond just presentation. Recently we're doing presentations that were based on images and sources that were given in the Viking module. And then on Fridays, after we collect all the research and make the presentation, we deliver it to the rest of the class. It would be nice actually to have a hand in module creation. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I can see Keith in the audience, so and now that he can't talk back, so I can speak with impunity. I've pitched this to Keith. I think co-creating curriculum would be really, really cool at the university, and I think the fact that the departments aren't so big, would give us the scope to do that. That being said, I don't, I'm not an academic. I don't know what forms that might take. I don't want to have to, I don't want to talk myself too big and then end up having to learn the curriculum and write the curriculum myself. But I think being involved in what modules we do and the ways in which they're taught will be super, super cool. And I think to some extent, actually, the university does that pretty well already. As Faraz was saying earlier, things about course rep feedback and student voice forums are really valuable. And even though I haven't been present at those meetings, I can see the consequences of our feedback, having real effects on our course. So I would love to do that. And I think it's actually going quite well already.
Same here, yeah. I'm thinking it would be, it's going to be a good year. And I think it would be, just a good idea to do have at least some hand in it, maybe not create it entirely, since it does take a lot of effort since we're not at that level yet, me and Alex, but it would be nice to have a hand in it and think of some topics to be added to the modules.
I like that. We've got confidence. We're not at that level yet. Soon we might be there, though.
I'm sure you will. The way that you're going, Keith. Do feel free to respond as well. Let's put your comments back to Alex. I guess in terms of starting to wrap up, are there any kind of obviously you've run through next steps, but can we look forward to any publications or perhaps reading more widely about the kind of the project, but also the co-creation element as well? And importantly, are those publications going to reflect the co-creation element? Are they going to be co-written with students, for example?
Yes, so the students have already contributed towards that with the involvement in the data analysis and in the kind of co-creating the research as such. And definitely students said they wanted to be involved in writing. So we're figuring it out of how to do it in the best way, in the way that exactly what Alex said, that we don't want to tell students that, hey, write this research article by a deadline and just leave it like that. So we have started working on a couple of articles. One is more focused on the product of the learning hubs and the blended pedagogies, and kind of pulling the data out of the questionnaire and the focus groups, and then another article on co-creation. But that's early stages, so we still have some scope and some room and to involve everyone who wants to be involved. But now we're working on how we can continue. So we need further funding. So we're, so that students can get paid for their work, and that's important in co-creation as well. I think that we're not, it's our job to do these things, and we get paid for it. So students should also be paid in working with us on the products. So I think that's my next writing thing that I'm doing alongside the actual publications.
Super. Something that we can all kind of look forward to in the time to come. I think Keith in the chat is eyeing up a secondment maybe with module leaders of Alex and Faraz. That might be quite a nice. They've got it covered, which is good. But thank you so much. I think as sort of the hour comes to a close, we'll draw it there. But as Kevin said, I would really encourage anybody perhaps watching this back or that have attended the webinar to get in touch and check out the website as well to learn more. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. So thank you, Ivana. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Faraz, and thank you, Alex. It's been fascinating to sort of hear you share these ideas. And we look forward to seeing where the project goes in the coming months. So thank you everyone for also attending.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for staying the whole hour.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.